Salem Witch Trials Essay. January 1692 marked the infamous hysteria of what was known as the Salem Witch Trials in the province of Salem, Massachusetts. Occurring during the era where nations from all over the world held a strong belief in the idea of the supernatural, the Salem Witch Trials was an event where innocent people were accused and persecuted for supposedly being witches. Affecting not only the Salem community at the time, but the world throughout history, we investigate the various factors which caused the event, such as the long-term cause of European influence in witch belief and the immediate cause of accusation scapegoats, to the results of the incident like the negative consequence of mass deaths, yet the long-term positive consequence of the change in the justice system in nations all over the world. It was due to the strong influence of Europe and their Christian belief in the supernatural and witch hunting during the 15th and 17th century that sparked the long-term cause of the witch trials in Salem. England already having persecuted its last accused witch 9 years before the Salem trials began in 1691, it showed how the isolation of the Salem community enabled itself to still become vulnerable to overvalued and outdated information. Salem being a Christian Puritan-based commune, their strict ways of worship and lifestyle made them narrow-minded to the superstitions that had migrated across from Europe churches. When the European Church published the first known witch-hunting manual, Malleus Maleficarum, ordered by the Pope, it led the Puritans into believing that what they were doing, as those were doing in Europe, they were committing a godly act. The church at the time, being the highest source of power to everyone, meant that what was usually said was correct and to be followed upon. That's why when the idea of witches and serving Satan came through the valued sources of Malleus Maleficarum, interpretations of the Bible, and past preaching of Christian churches, an inflicted paranoia began to erupt within Salem, as it once did in Europe, and caused the birth of witch huntings. The Salem following in its European allies' footsteps, people began using the idea of witch hunts and accusations for their own personal benefit, triggering Salem individuals to use witchcraft accusations as a way to escape and mask the real reasons of their life troubles. It became a short-term causative factor in the significant event. Dilemmas such as frontier war failures, economic dilemmas, and personal grudges prompted the use of witchcraft accusations and the conclusion that it was the catalyst of these problems in the first place. An example of the ongoing American battle against the Wabanakis, Native Americans, during 1689 and 1697, victories would be highly credited when they happened. However, when it came to military losses, it was suddenly believed that the Indians had an alliance with the devil, which had caused them failure. This was a way for wartime leaders to shift the blame from their unsuccessful attacks, and which was also receptive by the judges and magistrates, and so anyone suspected to have jeopardized their win would have been accused and persecuted. Economic rivalries were also another factor for blame when it came to the case of the poorer Salem village versus richer Salem town. With Salem town's fortune prospering, yet Salem village's fortune declining, influence and preaching from respected sources as such as Samuel Parris, minister of Salem village, it created a medium of hatred and envy in which citizens of Salem village used as fuel against Salem town. It concluded in the poorer citizens using witchcraft accusations for personal grudges against people they liked or wanted rid of. With an easy and trusted immediate escape of problems, it resulted in the significant frenzy of witch trials and persecution within the district. The Salem trials and accusations commenced in February 1962 and finished off after almost a year in January 93. With Salem village and Salem town being the primary locations of the occurrence, the first accusation was made by Betty Parris, daughter of the new church minister of Salem village, Samuel Parris, and his niece, Abigail Williams, where they supposedly fell ill and began complaining of strange symptoms, knife-like pains, prickling sensations, feeling of being choked, etc. With Dr. William Griggs being able to find no cause of the newfound illness, it led him to himself and Reverend Parris suspecting witchcraft as being the possible occurrence as the girls were bewitched. Quote, After pressing the girls to identify the witches who they believed were tormenting them, 3 women were named and then arrested: Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. With the exposure of the current affair, several girls began claiming that they had the same symptoms too, in order for them to name their desired accused, which were normally the village outcasts or those who were highly envied by others. As trials were held for many of the accused, the only way you could escape a death penalty as a subjected witch was to plead guilty and accuse other individuals for being witches. This led many innocent people being put on the stand, to which, even if they tried to plead innocent, would be overruled by spectral evidence claimed by the afflicted girls, acting under the influence, and would be most likely sentenced to death anyway. Resulting in the immediate negative consequence of justice, the Salem witch trials placed many innocent people, majorly women, in prison or death row for the invalid suspicion of being a witch. With more than 200 people accused, 100 in jail, and 20 victims killed, the damage was already done to those convicted, even after doubts in the validity and justice of the trials caused the trials to stop altogether. Sufferers such as the 60-year-old tavern owner, Bridget Bishop, first persecuted victim, alongside 19 other females, endured the inhumane death of being hung on Gallows Hill, with the exception of George Burroughs, ex-minister of Salem Village, forcibly replaced by Samuel Parris, who was pressed to death by stones for the conviction of allegedly siding with the Wabanakis and their witchcraft during war, thus being a factor in the American battle loss. It was because of these unjust killings that when the word of the Salem hunts and trials got out to wider society, people began to try and halt them. Important figures such as Increase Mather and many other ministers declared that no more trials should take place in late 1692, due to lack of evidence and disagreement with the trials in order to protect the innocent. Mather also preached a famous quote of the matter, saying, "It were better that 10 suspected witches should escape than 1 innocent person be condemned." With the Salem community realizing their mistake, they decided to terminate the trials. Even though the losses couldn't be compensated for, the consequence did have a positive aspect in the concept that helped change the legal system when facing future cases. By February 1693, Governor William Phipps decided to take over and stop all trials on a national level by sending an argument letter to Whitehall. By him doing so, he enabled a release for the accused witchcraft victims in prison by May in Salem and America. In the positive long-term consequence, because of the Salem witch trials, many weaknesses in the judicial system were exposed, and once before was a system that relied on hearsay testimony and even encouraged accusations, had now been revolutionized into a system with more justice from 1703 onwards, when a bill was passed down disallowing the use of spectral evidence to be used in court trials for any cases. The revolutionized system has even contributed to become the basis of the legal system we know in current nations across the world by following America today, abiding by Sir William Blackstone's proclaimed formulation inspired by Increase Mather that better than that 10 guilty persons escape than 1 innocent suffer. We see throughout history, with other figures such as John Adams, second American president, that it is an idea which inspired today's judicial system around the world to produce justice through evidence and not speculation, innocent until proven guilty. Due to the mass regret of the event, the American government also ended up restoring all rights to those who had suffered an accusation in the Salem witch trials, and even gave compensation to them or their heirs. By the reformation of the working legal system and conscious mind towards humanity, the world was forever changed as a long-term consequence. Overall, the event of Salem witch trials demonstrate that the government systems at the time were so basic and underdeveloped that the minor causes of the following trends, following false information and blaming other sources for your problems, can be the causes that trigger the weaknesses in the system. Even though the event was a tragic occurrence for those involved during the time, If it wasn't for the event of the Salem witch trials, the government wouldn't have improved in such a way that we are still able to use the laws that they had today, innocent until proven guilty as a long-term consequence of law. Another positive result from the event is that we, as humanity, have evolved to become more sympathetic and less barbaric, in which resulted in the doubt of the witch trials and the system and apologies to those who had suffered.